All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Vanessa Conlin, the head of wine for Wine Access. I am really excited today. I've got not only two open bottles of Opus One next to me, the 2007 and the 2010, but I'm also going to be joined by Michael Silacci, winemaker, probably one of the most entertaining hosts I've ever had at a winery. He regaled stories that included 90s hip hop references to winemaking, as well as classic soul. So I always do my homework in terms of thinking of questions to maybe engage with people on these, but I have to say that I don't feel like I'm going to have to ask a lot of questions. So I see that Opus One Winery has joined. I'm just waiting for them to send me the request to join, but in the meantime, I'm not lonely because I do have these two delicious bottles of wine. So Michael, whenever you have a sec, send me the request to join the video and I will log on with you. But in the meantime, we've got two beautiful vintages, so 07, 2010 Opus One that we're going to be enjoying together. So, all right.
Just waiting for Michael, and there you are.
Hi there, Vanessa.
Hi. Either I've been drinking a lot, or you're horizontal, but it's
am
fine.
I turning sideways?
I do have two bottles of wine open, so it could be me.
No, it's not you because you're horizontal too. I was trying to get to the landscape view, but we'll fix it in just a moment.
It's no problem. It's no problem. Thank you. I have to say, I'm working from home these days, and I've really tried to create a nice background for these type of things, but I cannot compete with your background, no matter how hard I tried. That's one of the most spectacular cellars that I've ever visited. There you are, right side up, but
right
you were right all along, Michael. No worries.
My mind may still be a little sideways.
I hope it is. That's why we're here. We want to hear all about what's in your head. So thank you so much for joining. And for anyone who's just logged in the last minute or so, my name is Vanessa Conlin, head of wine for Wine Access, and I'm here with Michael Silacci of Opus One. In addition to two beautiful bottles of Opus that I have open, I've got the 07. I've got the 2010, and now we have some folks to listen to us gab to each other. So thanks for joining, everyone at home. Please, if you have questions, type them in the chat box. We'll try to answer as many as we can. But so Michael, I have kind of a basic question for you, but one that I really wanted to ask, which is okay, your first vintage, you've been hired to make Opus One. How much pressure did you feel that first vintage?
To be honest with you, not much, and I don't mean that in a flippant way, but I get a little frazzled when there's a little bit of pressure on me, but when there's a lot of pressure on me, it doesn't. I kind of go into maybe a survival mode. I don't know what it is, but it is true. It is a little different when it's just one wine. There is a different type of pressure, and so I think the best thing to do is to just go with the flow and try to enjoy it, and that's what I did. And I had some really great people to work with, and the team has gotten even better over time. But I had an intern who, Jean-Emmanuel Danjois, who was with me. I convinced him to he says I fished him out of his parents' swimming pool because there was a woman at work who he had done 2 internships before I showed up, and she sent me a photograph of him in his parents' pool in Johannesburg, South Africa. His father worked for the French bank, for a French national bank or some bank. Anyway, so he was there in the swimming pool in an inner tube, cigar in one hand, glass of red wine in the other, and she said, "Find this man a job." And so I invited him to come to Opus for this 3rd internship, and he said, "No, 2 internships is enough." And so I convinced him. I made him an offer he couldn't refuse, and he came to work with us. And then he became full-time. And July 1st is just this last July 1st, he became the estate manager of Baron Philippe de Rothschild for technical winemaker for Mouton Rothschild, Clairemillon, and d'Armagnac. He had been at Clairemillon since 2009. So anyway, started out with a great person with whom I worked, and then it's gotten even better. Great people to work with. So that kind of takes the stress off of being responsible for just one wine. And the vineyard workers, you know, they know what they're doing better than I do. I just give them some general things that I look for and turn them loose, and they're like sculptors. They do an amazing job in the vineyard, and the cellar workers are like painters. And so between the two of them, or the two groups, we've kind of got it made.
So I'm also curious, what sort of things, are there any things in terms of winemaking that the minute you jumped in there, you're like, well, I want to change this? And part two of the question, what are some things that you've never changed at all since you took over?
Okay. What do I want to change? Well, I interviewed from June of 2000 until January of 2001. That's when I was offered the position. And I had driven around the vineyard you can learn so much about a vineyard when the leaves fall off the vines after harvest. And the first thing I wanted to do was severely prune the vines and get them to a different type of balance. And the two main things I wanted to change were I wanted to increase the concentration of the wine and lengthen the finish. Most of that would be done in the vineyard, but you can also do that with barrels. And so I challenged some coopers after I got to know them. I challenged some coopers to do things with the barrels that would increase concentration and lengthen the finish. So those were the two things. But I really wanted to just, honestly, I wanted to just make a subtle difference to the wine. I wanted to enhance tradition and maintain innovation. That was my mantra. And so the vineyard, and then we did a lot of things right away in the vineyard with pruning and irrigation or lack thereof. The way we picked the fruit, what we defined as ripeness. The whole goal being we wanted to make wines that were classic, that would reflect the time, the season, through the flavors and aromas, and the place through the mouthfeel. So what did I not change? Well, up until not too long ago, I didn't change Donut Tuesdays. And it took, actually, it's funny, every Tuesday there's, actually it's like bakery goods from Bouchon Bakery. Mm-hmm. And it took me a year to figure out that there was a Donut Tuesday, because I was, you're so focused when you first start. And then one Tuesday, almost a year into my time here, I said, where is everybody? I went walking around the winery and I found them all down in this room over here, having pastries, and that's how I learned about it. Nobody told me. So the only thing I changed with COVID-19, it was just my team. There's 45 of us working in the vineyard, cellar, et cetera, maintenance and facilities. And the only thing I changed was we started having breakfast burritos on Tuesday mornings. So, because the guys, men and women, start early, and so they need a nice hearty breakfast. And so that's maybe something I wasn't going to change, but I just did recently.
Got it. A little bit more protein. I can understand that. Exactly. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, was your first vintage 2001?
Yes.
Okay, so here we are. You started in 2001. Here we are heading into, we're in 2020. How do you continue to find inspiration at every vintage?
Oh my gosh, it's not difficult. I mean, because it seems like, we're always pursuing nuances, we never really make huge changes, but we make little adjustments and the nuances. And, any one thing we might do that isn't nuanced, you may not be able to tell the difference from, the time before till now, but it's the accumulation, it's the sum of all nuances that make a difference. So we're constantly fine-tuning what we do, and whether that's in the vineyard or the cellar, with the way we work with teams. There was a time when I wanted everyone to know how to do every task in the cellar, and now I realize that we just need to let people do what they do best. So the people whose strengths are racking or bottling or whatever, then that's what they get to do, and because they can excel at it, and we're not trying to improve weaknesses. So
so I have, this is maybe an unanswerable question, but I really want to pose it to you, which is, when I go, wherever I travel, talking to consumers, people know Opus One. There is sort of this reputation worldwide, and it sort of seems to span consumers who know a lot about wine, all to consumers who are maybe still getting new to wine, but they know this name. So what do you attribute that notoriety to, aside from quality, of course, which we know is there? But is there something else about Opus that has just captured people's attention?
I think it has to be the founders. You can't start out with Baron Philippe de Rothschild and a connection to Mouton without people hearing about you. And then Mr. Mondavi, who did so very much to bring attention to Napa Valley wines. And then, of course, the Paris tasting. I mean, there are a lot of factors. And I think, but those two gentlemen are I think the key to people knowing, at least having heard about the wine. Every now and again, I run into people who don't know, have never heard of Opus, and that's kind of fun. And it's not offensive at all. It's kind of refreshing, because then you can start with somebody with a clean slate and show them what you do. I was my significant other was on a Zoom meeting, or I forgot what it was, but anyway, I tuned in yesterday. And I wrote a question in the chat, so it had to be Zoom. I wrote a question in the chat, and neither of the people that were hosting could pronounce my name or had any idea who I was. So, and that was fun. Victoria said, "Did you hear that?" And, later, and I said, "Yeah." And she goes, "Did it bother you?" And I said, "Of course not. I think it's fun. People don't know me. One more person to get to know, or two in that case."
I kind of love that story, and that makes me wonder: is there something that, because most people do know Opus One and know who you are, do you feel like there's a question that you wish that people would just ask you, but you think that they don't because it's, I don't know, it's not an intelligent question to pose to the winemaker of Opus One?
No, I tell you, this has happened on many occasions, but I'll give you one really fun example. One time I was walking in the rotunda and I saw two gentlemen pressing the button to the elevator. And I walked over and I said, "Well, the restroom is not those shiny doors, but the oak doors to your left." And the guy said, "I'm busted. I was here a year ago, and I was trying to take my friend down to see this barrel room that you have that's kind of curved, that barrel room that's here." He didn't know who I was. And I said, "Oh, the Grand Chez." And I said, he goes, "I'm really sorry, but we're really busy and we don't know, we're out here just for a few days, and we never know if we can actually come and do a tour, and I don't like to bail on a tour, so I'm sorry." And I said, "Well, come on, I'll take you down there." So I did a tour in reverse, and they had a glass of wine, we got another glass of wine later. And at the very end, this fellow asked me, "So what do? You seem to know a lot about this." And I said, "Well, I'm actually the winemaker." And then I said, "What do you do?" And he said he was the president of IndyCars. His name was Mark Miles. And it was so cool. He said, "You've got to come this Saturday. We're doing an IndyCar race at Sears Point, I guess in Finian. I don't remember, Sonoma, whatever it is now, in Finian. So you have to come, and you can bring a friend." And he invited me to the Indianapolis 500. So two people who just enjoyed getting to know each other without caring who they were.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot. I will meet people in the parking lot and bring them in and give them a tour. And it's not, it never even occurs to me that I need to, actually, I don't want to say who I am, if I think about it, because then there's no intimidation, which there shouldn't be. And we can just have a good conversation and chat, and then they can, at the end, they may ask, or someone else may tell them. But what kind of question? I don't know. What's the essence of life in a glass of wine? I don't know.
How long do you have?
Yeah, exactly.
let's dive into that. I don't know. Yeah. Maybe I should, or let me rephrase the question. Is there, let's say, a myth either about just wine in general or Opus One that you hear that you wish that you could dispel in the minds of consumers?
Oh, okay. One time I was, yes, I took a class at during harvest. I used to like to take little classes here and there. And so I took one at the Napa Valley College, and it was the wines of the world. And so you'd have students who would go through and pour the wines. And so I just started pouring because I didn't want to just sit there. It makes me nervous. So I started pouring the wines, but I had told the instructor, Michael Weiss, I said, please don't tell anyone who I am. I just want to be participating in the class. Three times, people, I overheard people saying something about Opus that was totally false. I mean, a big fat lie, a big fat myth. So I just recorded them in my mind because he had asked me, when we get to the Bordeaux class, would you give it? And would you bring in Mouton? And I brought in Mouton, Clairemont, d'Armagnac, and Opus. And so during that class, when I was talking about Opus, I would look at the person who said the first thing that wasn't true, and I corrected it, and their eyes got big and they kind of slid down in the chair because how did he know I said that? And so, I mean, there's all kinds of things like we buy fruit to make Overture, and Overture is, if we did that, Overture would be a second label. It's actually a second wine, which means that we have our 4 estate vineyards, and whatever we don't put into Opus becomes a candidate. Those lots become candidates for Overture. So we don't buy fruit from outside. And that actually was, I was at Stag's Leap Wine Cellars taking some friends there, and there was a guide or a host who was pouring, who was talking about the vineyards of Fay and SLV, and he was totally mixed up, and it was just totally messed it up, but I didn't say anything. And then he did say to them, why I don't know, he didn't know who I was, but he said to his guests, well, you know, like Opus One, they have contracts for fruit to make their Overture. And I said, that doesn't. And so I went over and I said, hello, I'm Michael Silacci. I am the winemaker at Opus One, and I make Overture. And I used to be the winemaker here. So let's go over to this map. And so I corrected him on the soils and the geology of Fay and SLV, and told him that we had fun. I mean, it wasn't like I wasn't being aggressive or
Sure.
harsh. I just was just having fun with it. And at first he was a little embarrassed by it. But I said, there's no need to be, you know. This is why people ask questions, or this is why you need to acknowledge something and not just let something go on like that. Let that be that story be exaggerated and continued. So
I love that. It was probably that person's best day ever. And anyone who's just joined us kind of halfway through, I'm Vanessa Conlin. I'm here on behalf of Wine Access as head of wine with Michael Silacci of Opus One. So just to kind of go back to the history, there's probably no more famous partnership between, you know, Napa and Bordeaux that I can think of. So what do you think are some of the things that, you know, that Bordeaux does better than Napa? What are some things that Napa does better than Bordeaux, and how can we learn from each other?
yeah, well, first of all, Bordeaux doesn't do anything better than that. I'm just joking. I think that I think it's definitely the care and the sense of place that is really respected and honored in Bordeaux. I think that is probably something that was a huge lesson for everyone here. When the first wines were being made, the 79 and 80 had 24 months in barrel and just 10 days skin contact. And then there was no press wine added. And Lucien Siena, who was here from Bordeaux, said, well, I need some press wine. Bring back the press wine lots. And the enologists at Mondavi were kind of, you know, licking their chops because, oh boy, he's going to take some press wine off of our hands. And because at that time, everyone thought, you know, early 80s, late 70s, that press wine was all you needed. And he said, you have left things, he had to explain, or he did explain, you've left things in the press wine that you've taken from the free run, and we need to put those back. That's why press wine is so important. And so that was something I think that was a good lesson. And then reducing the amount of the number of months in barrels. The French did bring a really regimented, you rack every 4 months, and I thought that was, we changed that when I came. We rack when we need to. But what did the French learn from the Americans? How to be hospitable? No, I don't mean, no, I didn't mean it like that. How to welcome consumers.
Yeah.
How to share wine with consumers.
Yeah.
And how to open your doors as if it's you're welcoming people into your living room, because they weren't used to that, and some still are not. I think a lot of things on maybe sales, how to sell wine. The importance of varieties, maybe, because there's more blending in Bordeaux. The issue in France is they've got a lot of rain. Well, actually, things are changing, with climate change, but they have a lot of rain, so irrigating is a huge no-no. Here we have a lot of sun, so chaptalization is a huge no-no. Yeah. So just learning that each has their constraints and has their difficulties. So you get rain during harvest in France, and you have to know how to deal with that. Somebody comes from France in a harvest in Napa, and it rains, and they don't panic. They just, they know how to deal with it.
Right.
We get a hot spell, we know how to, a heat spell, we know how to deal with it. So I think the communication, I'm part of a couple of different groups in Europe and in France. And there's a lot of exchanges, and David Pearson started the International Cabernet Symposium that we no longer are doing, but this exchange of information is extremely important.
Yeah. And
open-mindedness.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
Are you coming on September 1st to sing at our Blessing of the Grapes? 9 o'clock.
I forgot about that. If I'm still invited, I'll be there.
You are definitely invited. Okay. Now that we got my one question out of the way.
Well, you mentioned being hospitable, and I do think that's something that we do beautifully here in Napa. But I have to say, you were such a wonderful host. We brought the Wine Access team to visit you last year, and you were so kind to open many vintages for us to taste side by side. And what is so remarkable, I think, is no matter what the vintage, you understand the character in the glass of that vintage. But there's this through line of elegance and quality across all vintages. And I just wanted to know if it's something that's explainable on Instagram. How do you do that? How can you take every single vintage and still have this character of Opus and yet still showcase that individual year?
Well, basically there are in my mind, three styles of wine. Before we go any further, I have to thank and acknowledge Greg Miller too, because he really was the one who set this up with you. So now that I've gotten that out of the way, a question and an acknowledgement. Three basic styles of wine. One is an expression of a personality. So, usually it's somebody with a really big personality, and just like they leap out of a chair or out of their skin or into a room, their wines do out of the glass, and they tend to be very fruit-driven, really intense, lots of wood, etc. And these wines are very good because they have their own balance point, but maybe it's difficult to tell where they came from. Then you have a wine that's a house style. So each year the winery is trying to make the same basically style of wine, and maybe they hold back 3 to 5% from the year before that they blend into the new wine, or they put new wine into the vintage before it's going to be bottled. So that's more of a house style. And then you have what I consider to be the classic style, which is the expression of time and place. So, for example, we're tasting 7 and 10. 7, a very warm year, we're going to have more ripe fruit in the aroma and the flavor. The 10 was a cooler year, and it has more herbal notes and some fresh fruit. But the thing is that that's the time, that's a reflection of the season, but it's really the reflection of the place that carries the most weight, because 80% of wine quality comes from the vineyard, let's say. If we use the 80-20 rule, it might be 90%. And then we are here just to help guide it. You know, we have to make the right decision when we pick, to make sure there's good acidity, good freshness, some herbal notes as well, and some fresh fruit, because you're going to end up with ripe fruit anyway at some point. But we don't acidulate, so we have to make sure we have enough acidity to balance the tannins. Right. And so it's the mouthfeel, which is a reflection of the place. That is the underlying connection from vintage to vintage in my mind.
Yeah. Well, thank you for also sending these beautiful bottles. I do have them open, the 7 and the 10. And speaking of vintages, I did have a question come through, which is, what are your top 3 vintages?
Personally, or for Opus?
This question just came through on Instagram. Okay. So your top 3.
My top 3 would be 1987. That was a vintage. That was the first year of five years of drought. The berries it was a nice warm summer, lower yields and smaller berries, but that doesn't mean that lower yields lead to higher quality. It's a balanced vine that leads to higher quality. And that year, the berry size and the yields were very well balanced with the canopy. And that to me remains just my favorite since I've been here. Then I would probably go with, I'd have to go with 2010. That's why I always like to include it in tasting, so I get to taste
Delicious.
it.
Yes.
That was the most difficult vintage I've ever experienced. We did have slightly higher yields, and so they just, with the cool summer, it just, everything, the flavor and aroma compounds were in sync with sugar accumulation. And that vintage was like being in an Aikido match with Mother Nature, trying to take her energy and transform it, channel it into something positive. And that was, so that probably was the vintage that if I was going to be frightened or panicked, it would have been 10. But it's, I don't know, it was just, we were so focused and so in tune with it that it worked out. And again, no one else panicked. Everyone stayed the course. My third favorite, maybe 2005 or 1, maybe let's say 2005, because that vintage to me is classic Opus One, classic in the way in this way. From 79 through 84, Lucy and Sienna worked with Tim Mondavi. 85 to 90, it was Patrick Leone and Tim Mondavi. And then the winery was first used in 1991. So there's like 3 different eras of winemaking before I came. And when I tasted verticals, I drew in my mind like a caricature of each era. And then I scrunched them together, and when I put them all together in my mind, that was classic Opus. And in 2005, time and place overlapped classic Opus as I knew it, as I felt it. So I guess that would be it.
I do have another question from someone at home, which is, how long can you age Overture?
Forever and a day, I guess. No, I say that because the first vintage was 93, and first vintage, that was the first year they made this non-vintage wine. And I've tasted it recently, and it's showing really well. Now, that's not a very old wine. But if you think about California wines that tend to be in this classic mode, they tend to age well. If you look at the old Inglenooks or the old Beaulieu's. They tend to age, and the key is the balance between the acidity and the tannins.
Mm-hmm. So this has been very generous of your time. I know it's cocktail hour, so I won't keep you, but there's a very, very important question that also came in from someone watching at home, which is about the burritos. So Sunshine or La Luna Market?
Actually, it's Cucina Severiano.
Oh.
This is someone, I worked with a woman, Ophelia Delora, at BV a long time ago, and we've remained friends, and her husband is the vineyard manager at Snowden, and he's a fantastic chef. So he's the one that, they're the ones we order the burritos from. I actually messed up. I didn't order them for today. We ordered pastries. But next Tuesday we're having burritos again from Seve and Ophelia.
Wow.
So.
And will the burritos be present at the Blessing of the Grapes? I need to know.
They will be. They will be. Yes. This is normally we don't, but this year is a rather special Blessing of the Grapes because it's September 1st is also very early for us to do the Blessing of the Grapes, but we're doing it because it's David Pearson's last day. And so we're going to have a Blessing of the Grapes, and we're going to have, a lot of people have, I think more people have mimosas than champagne. So we'll have probably Krug champagne for those who don't put orange juice in it, and maybe something else for those who do put orange juice in their mimosas. And we're going to have burritos. And then for lunch, we're having 2 different styles of pizza that David likes. And I hope he's not listening. And then cheeseburgers and French fries, and then carrot cake. So Sarah Scott's making the carrot cake.
Oh, she's amazing.
Probably Mustards will do the cheeseburgers, and the pizzas I don't remember where they're coming from, but I spoke with his wife, Linnea, and she told me where his favorite pizza places were. So, and we'll have Paul Roger with the pizza. And 2004 Opus One with the cheeseburgers, because that was his first year.
Well, what I'm taking away from this is that I need to come hungry and thirsty.
Yes.
And also ready to sing for my breakfast and my lunch.
Exactly.
All right. Well, we have a deal. I would have done it without the Krug, but since you mentioned it, I'll take a glass when I'm there. So, well, Michael, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time. And, at Wine Access, we absolutely love Opus. We love working with you guys. We love you. So really appreciate you hopping on Instagram, and I really appreciate everyone who joined us just to, chat about burritos and great vintages of Napa, and, So.
And the feeling's mutual. We have an affinity for Wine Access.
Thank you. Well, it's easy to you have such an amazing story, and it makes it easy for us because that's what we live for, right? Telling these great stories about wine. So
I'll make sure we have some M&Ms for dessert for you.
Oh, perfect. Okay. You just keep sweetening the deal. I mean, you had me just show up at the winery, but okay.